Welcome to episode number 10 of the Road to Cinema podcast, featuring Oscar-nominated editor William Steinkamp. On today's episode, we discuss the importance of the editor-director collaboration. Among the directors we highlight include Oscar winner Sydney Pollack, Joel Schumacher, Martin Brest, Steve Kloves, and the late George Hickenlooper. Among the films on today's agenda include Tootsie, starring Dustin Hoffman, Out of Africa, starring Robert Redford and Meryl Streep, The Firm, starring Tom Cruise, The Fabulous Baker Boys, starring Jeff Bridges, Michelle Pfeiffer, and Beau Bridges, A Time to Kill, starring Matthew McConaughey, and Casino Jack, starring Kevin Spacey. For more information on the Road to Cinema podcast, to read the Road to Cinema blog, and to watch our Road to Cinema YouTube series, please visit jogroadproductions.com. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter for the latest updates at JogRoad. And now we join Oscar-nominated editor William Steinkamp as he discusses his introduction into the business, working with his father, Oscar winner Frederick Steinkamp, on 3 Days of the Condor with Sydney Pollack, and on one of Billy Wilder's last films, Fedora. From what I understand, the first film that you worked on as an assistant was one of Billy Wilder's last films, actually Fedora, which you worked on with your father, Frederick.
Right. So
what was your experience being on that film, and was that really kind of your first learning experience about editing?
No, actually, I started in 74, 75 as an apprentice on 3 Days of the Condor, which was a Sydney Pollack picture. And that was actually my first experience in just generally in the business, actually having to do things. And it was good. You know, at the time I wasn't in the union. I was trying to get in the union, but picked up an incredible amount of experience. And that's really sort of where I started liking what I was doing. Wasn't too sure to start with. And then and Billy Wilder scared me. Billy was, I was young, and he was just this legend walking around. He and I.A. Diamond, and it was a big language barrier. It was a mixture between German and English. So we had an assistant who was German, spoke German, and I didn't speak German, and she didn't speak English. So that was kind of an experience all by itself. But Billy was a master. I mean, some people don't really quite understand how amazing he was with his camera. You know, he camera cut, and he knew exactly what he wanted. He was the most prepared person in the world. You know, his styles and everything were always, way ahead of time. And at that time when I worked with him, people thought it was more of an old style, but he really knew what he was doing.
So he really knew where one shot led to another in terms of the editing process. So when he had a shot list going in to film a scene, he was really prepared in terms of how he saw it being cut together. In a sense,
I think he was not only prepared, but he had his, he demanded his actors be prepared.
Yeah.
And really, basically, with him is more, cut the slate off. That's where it starts. And please go as far as you possibly can before I say cut. And it was, it was an experience. I kept thinking, wow, this is going to be fairly easy, if this is all there is to it. So, but then I soon found out it wasn't. But he was a really interesting man. I was very grateful I got a chance to meet and work with him.
What was it like at that point working with your father, having that working dynamic? Did he teach you a lot of sort of basic lessons about editing?
I had two mentors, my dad and Sydney, and both gave me various points. My dad always insisted that I know everything. He said the only way to know if somebody's doing a job wrong is to learn how to do their job. So I basically ground out from the start. I had to know how to do sound. I had to know how to deal with music, had to deal with picture editing, and also generally dealing with people, Yeah. And I think because of that hammering of learning everything and knowing how to do it well, it's helped my career immensely. I mean, I learned dialogue from an incredible person, Kay Rose, who was still on film, but amazing tricks and amazing things you can do with sound and dialogue that she taught me. And then came along with Sydney, and his strong suit obviously is acting and learning acting and story. And that's one thing my dad always drove home to was story. You have to know story, performance, how to build a performance. People are under the impression sometimes that actors just they show up on screen and it's an incredible performance and they've done it all by themselves. it's a team effort, you know. I mean, you've never shoot in continuity, very rarely shoot in continuity. So if you have a very difficult scene, and actors in the middle of it, they're kind of bracketing things and trying to find their way also. So you have to try to find. I've started many scenes where I think the person will be going one way and then cut like 15, 20 minutes in the middle of a movie, and then go back. Oh, we have to readjust this whole thing because we've gone in a different direction. It's really about learning acting. I think if one of the biggest things I would ever do to start over again, or any advice, I would have editors go learn acting, story, acting, rhythm. Rhythm's something you can't teach, something you have to feel.
Is that pace as well? Like
pace,
sort of knowing how
pace, rhythms, knowing rhythms, how to change a rhythm within inside a rhythm. You know, it's very easy to be metronomish when you cut, especially dialogue. And knowing how to internally change rhythms in a scene to try to pick up not only pace, but on direction of what the scene's trying to tell you, you know, within the story. It's always kind of a bigger picture. It's never one individual scene that makes a whole movie. It's a lot of different scenes that make a whole movie.
Yeah. Sometimes when you're reading a screenplay before the film has ever been shot, do you like to sort of get a general sense of what the screenplay is, or do you kind of, when the film is done filming completely, do you sort of have a concept of what the film is, or do you just like to look at the raw footage and say, I'm just going to edit from the raw footage and not really look at the screenplay?
Actually, I like to read a script. I like to read a script straight through.
Yeah.
I don't even read descriptions. I just read it straight through and see if the story makes sense, see if the story is interesting. Then you can start to see if it works. I mean, usually I have this very strange inherent thing. I read it, and if I like it, I get very involved with it. And if it loses me somewhere along the line, I try to go back and figure out where it loses me. Depending on who you're working with, is how far you can push your ideas. You know, they can come out later.
Yeah.
It's really, I think, it's why I've gotten along really well with writers, directors, because what we're doing is taking their words and rewriting them with film. And the understanding and the bridge between those two pieces, those two mediums of writing and film, are not that far apart. And really, I mean, it's like with Steve Clovis on Fabulous Beggar Boys, who wrote it. Yeah. We got along amazingly because you could see how not only what his intentions were writing, the dialogue was terrific, but he saw how you rewrote the words on film.
He saw the translation of what a script page could be, sort of going into the filmmaking process.
Absolutely. Yeah. It was a learning experience for both of us because we were both we didn't have any restrictions on what we could try and what we could do. We were both flying a little blind, so experimenting was great. And, that's the difference between film now and video. I mean, in film you had to think out your plan. You had the plan of attack because you're making splices and you had a lot of bulk of stuff, and you couldn't immediately change your mind in the middle, and you could cut yourself into holes and dead end corners and have to start over again.
Yeah.
And really that's the only difference between working on film and video is just it's a tool. It's a better tool than we had with moviolas. And I mean, I came up with moviolas and chems and Lightworks and then various other ones. And now I'm with Avid, and I think it's probably the best system out there for a tool for what I do.
So you don't really have a nostalgia for the old, cutting film?
I liked it. I thought the mystique of the film. You used to walk into an editing room with film, and there was bins and trims, and you had to have incredible assistance. That was what the whole process when I first started was. There was an established system. It was at one time it was 8 years before you could even cut. Then it was moved down to 5, which thank goodness it was for at the time that I started. But your organizational skills had to be amazing. I mean, there was if you cut a piece of film and you came down to frames and you had boxes of frames, they all had to be marked because if somebody came back and asked for a frame, you better know where it is. And video now gives you much more latitude to make mistakes. It gives you a lot more latitude to try different things quickly and then cast them away. Where in film, you didn't have that option.
You had to really make a commitment to a decision.
You had to make a commitment to a scene and say, this is the direction I'm going. And then the thought process was always beforehand rather than during. And, I mean, I even find myself now in video, I just go into something and go, oh, geez, I've gone the wrong way. And it can just delete it make a copy of it, stick it away someplace, and start over again. And it's speed that way, yes.
Yeah.
The thinking process is not sped up. It's just people are under the impression that video, this new age of video editing and everything, is just making the whole process faster. It really, in my opinion, doesn't, because you can't speed up the thinking process. You can you can explore faster.
Yeah.
And maybe in that case, you can expedite the actual scenes, but you still make the same amount of mistakes. You still spend a lot of time trying different things that aren't going to work. So the time averages out, and at least in what I've seen.
Yeah, sort of along that line, your collaboration process with directors. I guess we could start with Sydney Pollack, who you did so many films with. I guess Tootsie was sort of the first one that you were more at the helm with.
Right.
So what was he like? Every one of his films sort of explores a different genre. So does he work differently based on the genre of the film? Or is he very...
No, Sydney's a brilliant storyteller.
Yeah.
And he was even more brilliant with actors. And he always liked to fancy himself as a good editor, but he knew he wasn't. And that's pretty much why we stayed. We had the collaboration between all three of us at the time when I was working with my dad with him, and later with not with him. It was a second language that we knew. He knew that he trusted us enough to take a scene and come out of it with something that not only that he wanted, but maybe something he hadn't thought of. And each film was a little bit different. It was always performance driven. Always. It was one thing was hammered into me with him is you have to have consistency in performance. You have to look for something. It's nuance. It's anything besides just words, because it's easy to just say words.
So sort of looking beyond just the dialogue in a scene and seeing the behavior of what the actors are doing.
It's all about behavior, and it's all seeing how it all's working together. It's very difficult to shoot out of continuity, and he had this amazing ability to pull it in a big picture, which is always something that I strive for even today. It's always looking at the big picture. It's not just one little part that works. To how is it going to affect something else? And you have a picture like Tootsie, which was difficult, and we were under kind of short time restraints, and a lot of things that you're dealing with. And Dustin, and as far as the relationship with Dustin and I, we're still incredible friends now. That you've got to understand actors, and he made you understand actors. He had this ability to take the time and teach me what he knew and what he was thinking about acting, so you could find it throughout all the shows you work on with all actors.
Yeah. Is that a key to really be collaborative with actors? Sydney Pollack probably was one of the directors who worked so intuitively with actors. Like Dustin Hoffman, I believe, even collaborated on the script of Tootsie and was really there to sort of elevate the film in a sense.
I think
to make it the best it could be.
Yeah, I think that it's as times change, you have to change everything. But everybody has to change. Schedules get shorter. Acting is still what you have to do. It's still their faces on the screen. You still have to work with them. They're not all doing this by themselves. If you have somebody that's not actually in tune with what they're doing and they don't know what they're doing ahead of time, then you end up bracketing performances, which they used to do all the time. I know that Al Pacino in Scent of Woman, for a while, just trying to figure out how to play a blind guy and not have to do it with sunglasses all the time. So he had to find different ways to fix his eyes and still not look like he's reading or seeing something.
I'm sorry. So you had lots of takes with multiple options of how he played it.
Many. There was over 1 million plus feet of film on that film.
Wow.
And a lot of it was repetitive takes. And a lot of it was Al searching. And, and the final end of the product was pretty amazing. I mean, he was...
Oscar-winning performance.
Oscar-winning performance. The film was great, and everybody kind of did their jobs. And it was meticulous, hard work, but that was the exciting part about it. If it was easy, I wouldn't like to do it. If I wasn't learning something every single movie, even to this day, I would quit.
Yeah, this is a constant learning experience.
It is. Human behavior is never the same. They have traits. But everybody's different. Every story is different. Everybody's interpretation of a story, everybody's interpretation of a word is different. And so you get the palette you get to work from is immense. And if you enjoy your job, you enjoy the editing, it's more than just putting things together. It's and what you put it together with is just a tool. You should be like, as Sydney said, you were like a fine shoemaker. You didn't tell the shoemaker how to make a shoe. He already knew how to make the shoe. It was what shoe he was making was more interesting.
Yeah.
Same thing with editing. Same thing with especially anything you have to use something. Moviolas were great. It was a lot of physical work, but it was secondary. I didn't think about it after a while. I wasn't going from the moviola to the synchronizer and back and trying different things. It was all part of the system, so if you knew how to use the equipment, it didn't matter what you were using.
Yeah.
The physicality of it was no big deal. Then you moved to chems, and you had big rolls, and you're always constantly threading and stuff. I used to work with 2 or 3 8 plates.
Wow.
But I never, it was a pain in the ass. Sometimes film a break, do this, you have a lot of splices, whatever. But it was still second to what you were actually doing.
The thinking process never changes based on what the technology is.
Absolutely not. Not in my case.
Yeah.
Not in my case. And video editing today it's amazing. You get to try different things. I love it. And on Tootsie, I remember I was having a conversation with Sydney. It was a scene with Terry Garr and Dustin. They were sitting in their living room or something. And I kept thinking, there was this idea that you always had to pivot off of something. You had to go, you had to come around on this side and then go over to that close up. And then you had to always, there was like rules.
The standard logic of like cut to him when
he's
saying that.
Eye lines, eye lines still apply. And you see a break on the line all the time. And it's getting more and more acceptable. But I always thought, well, why can't you just go straight into them? I used to love to just play around with going in the middle of words. So it just people started calling it seamless.
Yeah.
You'll be able to go in and not really feel the cut, but you're suddenly there someplace else. And when the first time I showed him a cut like that, and he goes, "Oh, what was that?" I go, "Well, no, it's like we tried." He goes, "Well, it works, but we can't do that." And it kind of got left like that because you'll see the scene and it's cut, more traditionally. But as the time goes on, that idea, I don't know, I think somebody else, they said the Europeans came up with it. It doesn't matter who came up with it. But
it's sort of the pre-lap element of having like a line come.
Yeah, but then you're just going straight in. No pivoting, no anything. Just going from one medium wide right into a close-up, right into something else, right into the person's face. And that's where acting was incredible. They had to, if they were in the character, they're going to be in the character in a close-up, in the wide shot, the medium shot, over shoulder. Some of them aren't so great on over shoulders, but they had to be in the character, so it wasn't a tough move to go in. Yeah. And it was dramatically great in places and comedically great in places.
Do you ever have ideas for coverage before the shooting of the film has started, where you'll tell a director, "Hey, I really think that you need this footage, this close up here, this insert here to really make the scene work"?
Now I do. When I first started, I was still, you're learning, and you're kind of learning the process, and there was quite a hierarchy of going in and telling somebody what you needed. Sometimes after the fact, you say, "I really need this," and it's only after you forge a relationship with the director at that time that they would actually listen to you. It's more, I know what I got, and I have it. And now I can go through a script. It's been quite a while, but I can go through a script and say, "Look, this is the way you can break it down," and I can almost cut it in my head before they even shoot it. Right. And it's helpful, especially when it's long. Anything's long, you start to find lines, dialogue that, well, this is said twice. This is not necessary, and you can start to have this ability to, through experience, knowing this is going to happen anyway, and try to avoid it now.
Or maybe even playing a scene off an actor's face and just eliminating dialogue and doing it visually.
Absolutely. There's just different things, different ways to do things and do it smoothly.
Yeah.
And seamlessly, as people like to call it.
When it comes to sort of a first cut or an assembly cut of a movie, they usually come in, very long. Sometimes you hear about assembly cuts that come in like 4 hours, even if the script is like 110 pages. Have you encountered that where you have such a long first cut and then you're working to sort of minimize and bring down the pace of the movie?
I'll give you two answers. One is my standard one. Assembly doesn't doesn't. I've said this my whole career, so it's nothing new.
Yeah.
When somebody says you're going to assemble something, it reminds me of being in a Ford plant that actually has directions, and A goes to B, and B goes to C, and C goes to D. I have never in my life assembled any scene ever. What I was always told and was hammered into, even excuse me, what I was hammered into, even with my dad's, like, whatever in film, whatever was on the right side that you had was in the take-up, that was, you should be able to show that and not be embarrassed with anybody. And at the end of the time, your first cut should be able to go and show to an audience.
Yeah.
So you have to make those decisions. I think the reason that some cuts are very long is that they will shoot a full script. And I think that there's a lot of editors that feel that they have to show the director everything he shot. One of the things with Sydney, he goes, "Don't show me everything I shot, for crying out loud." You know, it'll be 3 hours long if you do that. So you have to be able to have the confidence that you left a shot out. You have to have a reason.
Yeah.
You know, for everything you do, you have to have a reason. If you have no reason, then you've made a bad decision someplace. To me, is whether it be right or wrong, that's the decision I made to do. I left this out like this. I did this like this because of this. And if you don't agree with it, that's fine. We'll just undo it, and we'll do something different. But the conviction of, when I show you a first cut, it better be runnable for more than just myself, and I will not crawl under the couch because I don't like that cut, or I know I just left this in a master. I was never taught that way.
Yeah.
It was never an option with my dad. You know, it was like, you get in there, you dig out performance. If anything in the first cut can be a little overcut, because what you're trying to do is just dig and dig and dig performance and dig out the nuance and dig out the behavior. And then you find where you can back out a little bit, as opposed to a lot of editors will, a while ago, would leave it in a master and let the director decide where to go in. I always thought that wasn't part of my job. My job was to go find it and then be wrong or right.
And make those creative decisions as you're cutting.
Absolutely.
Not waiting for the director to come in and, dictate or...
Right, absolutely. I mean, you have a master that runs 12 minutes long, and the scene basically should be 4 minutes or 5 minutes. And if you just show a master in an assembly at 12 minutes, that's how movies get out to 3 hours long or 2 hours and 40 minutes. And there's always been that adage of a minute a page. Well, to me, it was because of
Have you had like 5-page scenes? Have you seen 5-page scenes and they come out to be sort of like in like a 12-minute time frame when they're shot? Has that happened to you?
Oh, sure. I mean, I just did something long ago. There was it was a 16-page dialogue scene.
Yeah. And
I went, this is going to be, how do you make two people talking? It's only two people, a lot of movement in a room, but it's 16 pages long. And going, how do you make this interesting? It's not like an action where you have something to cut to and you can surprise and move, and you've got two people talking.
Yeah.
It came out probably, a page count came out at 11 and a half minutes. It was too long. Even at that length, it was too long.
Yeah.
So I think that the page counts are a misnomer. It's something that was devised a little bit because of screenings with movies. The theater cutoff was 2 hours and 10 minutes, I think, something like that, so they could have another screening. If they went over 2:10, you lose a screening.
Yeah.
I'm not sure it pertains as much today because everything's on Netflix and God knows what else. But as what I always said, and I've always said to directors, I go, look, if it works, it works. If it works at this length, if you start to wonder what time it is, and you'll find studio executives all the time going, okay, what mark did this happen at?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know, did it feel too long? No, but that happens 25 minutes into it. We'd like to have that moment happen 16 minutes in.
Or maybe they're thinking like act breaks, like the act break comes too late. Or
it's all a process. Everybody has an opinion, and that's one of the hardest things about a director. They have to make the decision.
Yeah. Because I think of Sydney Pollack's The Firm, which is a 2.5-hour movie, probably one of the highest grossing films of the early 90s, and it's a thriller, and it has this quick pace to it, yet it is 2.5 hours, and it works at 2.5. Was that always like 2.5 works were sticking to this?
Yeah. I think at that point in time, his position was, if you were a first-time director and you were in a studio, they'd say, "Okay, take it out," and if you didn't, somebody else was going to. And there was more than a couple handful of directors that were like that, and then towards the end of now there's probably 3 or 4 that can get away with that. Saying this is how long it's going to be. Yeah. I've done 3 Grisham shows, all different. I think probably one of the hardest ones I ever do was A Time to Kill, and I can't recall how long that was. But one thing about with the firm, it was paced like it was written like that.
Yeah.
So you didn't feel length as long as you're entertaining, as you were moving and moving and moving all the time. And usually something like that, people go, "Oh my God, that was 2.5 hours? I could have sat for more." And you have shows that are 90 minutes and you go, "Man, that felt long." Yeah. It's all about interest, and everybody has a different taste and interest.
Yeah. No, I think in terms of thrillers, I mean, that's just a wonderfully constructed film. I've always enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was fun. It was a lot of fun. They rewrote the end as opposed to what the book was, and we took a little heat from that. But it was never we never were long. We were always right in that area anyway. So we never had there was a possibility. Okay, should we cut it down? And then you started thinking this is a time you really couldn't cut too much out of it. Maybe a little bit towards the end, but generally not.
Yeah. I was going to ask about how music and sound play into a cut of a film. So when you're developing a first cut and you're making those creative choices, do you ever lay in temp score or sort of spot music where you think it might work best?
You know what's funny? When we're on film,
yeah,
probably very rarely did you lay in film. I mean, in music, and you couldn't really do it unless you went to a dubbing stage and mixed it. There were found a lot of times more fight scenes and any type of action stuff you would go in and mix because there was an impossibility to sell the cut. It's one of the best things about when we went to Avid and to electronic editing that you could actually do that to a point. Sydney would never like to have music. He said you couldn't tell if a scene worked if you put music over it because it's just your ear guides you through the scene and you don't really feel link, you don't feel anything, you feel great music. If the music's great, it just takes you through. It's how MTV started, really. And they found they could do in a 2.5-minute piece of music, they could show you any image they want, in any speed they wanted, and you would stay with it because the music was taking you from one end to the other. Then he decided that he couldn't do it without music, so it was like, come on, you got to attempt this music. And then you find yourself not only being a music editor and trying to make choices, and a lot of times it's hurtful for a composer because they get to live with it, 6-7 weeks, and you've lived with this, at least in those times, you live with 4 or 5, 6 months with the same music, and you fall in love with it, yeah. And then they go and they end up never giving you something that you like because you're so in love with something else that you'd heard, and you're so used to it. And we ran into that quite a few times, where they're going, just make it like this. Do the music like this. So it helps and it hurts, nobody these days can run anything without it being fully affected in music. And, it's like a finished product.
Yeah.
I mean, half the time now everybody's going out with an Avid mix to a theater and having previews. It's, there's obviously no more film and there's no more finishing touches. And, in all intents and purposes, they don't sound that bad because you can do quite a bit of work on it.
Yeah, and you can adjust sound levels on it.
You can mix it. You can do everything you want on it. You can make it pretty finished. I mean, sometimes people, they put titles on, and it looks like you go to an audience, and it's a preview audience. And my favorite thing is NRG people or whoever else is out there. They go, what you're going to see is an unfinished product. There's going to be, and they say, grease pencil marks, and there's going to be splices. Well, they can't say that anymore. And now they go, it's an unfinished thing. There's just a little bit of temp music, and there's really no effects, and blah, blah, blah. And they see it, and they go, what are you talking about? This is like, I don't know what else you're going to do with it. It's fully scored, and it's fully affected for most intents and purposes. Yeah. So their reactions are completely different than what they were looking for. They go, what's a finished product? I mean, if you put titles on a film, and a general audience, you show it to them, they think it's finished.
Yeah. I don't see why not. I mean, I saw a preview screening not too long ago, and they had the logo of the film.
Oh, yeah.
But they still went in and said, "Well, we're not really perfected, but
Yeah, could you please comment on what you didn't like?" Well, I don't know. I know. Well, the music's temporary, so I don't get to comment on that. And the sound's really not that done. And there's going to be some dialogue replacement. And they're going, huh?
Yeah.
And the savvy people in Los Angeles, yeah, they're going to go, oh yeah, well this is, everybody likes to be a critic. And generally, my taste, I'd much rather just listen to an audience. It's very difficult in a drama, but in a comedy, if you got them or not.
Yeah.
And and hopefully in a drama, if you've got them or not, how much movement's in an audience. But to select, this is my opinion, if you select 15, 20 people to come in to be a critic after the movie, it's ridiculous. You might get a few people that are, make a good point. And most of the time people are just, they pick on stuff and you go, well, there's not much you can do about that.
Sometimes they get a little nitpicky about it.
Yeah, or you have one person say something that one person has said in I don't know, anybody said, they go, see, see, I told you, and go fix that. So I don't know. I'm ambivalent about the preview process as is today, but I have a lot of people who argue against that with me. I might be one of the only ones.
Well, I think about, in terms of music, Dave Grusin, who worked with Sydney Pollack so many times. What was their collaboration process like? I think they did Tootsie together, I believe The Firm as well.
Yeah, The Firm was an amazing.
The piano score I loved.
It was all
really
piano.
Brilliant. Yeah.
I mean, I watched Dave. Dave's an amazing composer. And they worked so well together. It was, but watching Dave on The Firm, he would be inside of the piano bouncing ping pong balls off the strings and doing all these weird things, and it was an amazing score what he came up with. And like everybody tries different composers. They try different editors. Sydney wasn't always with us or me. But he always came back. It was normally schedules. Were messed up.
I think Owen Roisman, cinematographer, he worked with so many times.
Owen was incredible. He was, and I still see Owen every so often. They had a secondhand language they didn't have to speak. They knew what each other were doing. There was a trust thing, and it's like everybody says: if you want to make a good movie, you surround yourself with the best people. Yeah. I know it's been said by a million people. If I was to direct a movie, I would certainly go find the best cinematographer, the best writer, the best sound, the best everybody, so I can get a complete picture of what I want, and have the input and the creativity from these people. You draw from them all. You can never stand there as a dictator, as a director, and expect to know everything. Yeah. It's one of the biggest faults I think with some young directors these days. They don't want to surround themselves with knowledgeable people. I mean, a little bit is, this guy's kind of like my father, and I was there at 28 and dealing with people who are 60 and late 50s. Yeah. And all I was a sponge. I wanted to learn as much as I possibly could. These people knew more than I did. And if you go into it that way, like right now in my career, I was dealing with this young director. Her name was Amelia Ferrari. She sought me out to see if she could help her film. Her film was brilliant. It needed a hand, and she wanted a senior hand in what she was.
This was to recut a version that she
to recut it. Yeah, and unfortunately, I didn't. I was leaving for Europe, and I couldn't do it. But I gave her notes and went through it and took an interest in it. It had nothing to do with money or anything else. Just took an interest in her. Yeah. I took an interest in her interest and in my expertise at this point in time in my career. And that's what's lacking these days. I've met, enough younger directors who think they basically know it all. So it's very difficult to help them with something if they're not open to something. And I mean, at this point in time, I'd love to give back. I think it's important to keep this knowledge going. Nobody's teaching anybody anything anymore. Even the editing rooms, you're down to one assistant who's a mechanic on a computer, and they never get a chance. I let all my assistants cut. I want them to learn.
They would cut whole scenes, and
I haven't let them cut from start.
Wow.
We'll go through dramatically what you want out of it, comedically what you want out of it, anything what you want pace-wise, everything else. I go, here, go try it. That's the best part about Avid and this electronic is go in there and do it. Don't sit around here and do nothing.
Yeah.
I want you to go in and do this, and I want you to present it to me, and I'll critique it, and if I like it, that's going to be good for you. If not, you're going to learn something from me. So many assistants have turned into editors that these are the people that want to learn. I mean, how I used to learn, I used to do my assistant duties, and I'd have on shows I used to shoot in Europe, they'd double print film. So they'd have one set of prints of dailies that would go to Europe, and another set would stay here. And when it was all over, at 10 o'clock at night, I'd whip out all this film and start practicing cutting and doing stuff. Same thing with sound. Same thing with everything. I did a scene in a picture called Bobby Deerfield with Al Pacino and Mark Keller. I was an assistant.
One of Sydney Pollack's
Sydney
movies.
Pollack's films.
Yeah.
And at night, I cut a balloon scene. It was a balloon regatta that they were in.
Oh, they're in the hot air balloon going over. Yeah.
And I worked on this thing for, a week, maybe more. Put sound effects to it. Did this whole thing. It was all on film. And then at dailies one day, I looked at it, I said, I told my editor, I've got something to show you. And there was another editor out at the same time, I think at the time, Dave Brotherton. And they ran it, and he goes, wow, it was like, it was not only edited, but it was also sound effect and everything else. And he made a few suggestions, and I went back and made these changes and then put it away. And I remember Sydney getting back, and I don't know what day it was, when it was. And I said, I'm going to show you something. And he looked at it and goes, this is freaking great. And it was like, woo, this is fun. I've actually learned something along the way and got the guidance. I mean, they might have used ideas within inside of the material I did, but it was just the idea that it was scary to show it, but it was time to
But you had made an initiative to
absolutely
do the work.
I had to learn how to do it. You have to learn how to do it. People want to jump things. Film school is wonderful, but film school is producing nothing but people that want to come out and already know. They think they know how to do everything, and they want to jump and be directors and producers, and they get lost. We didn't invent the wheel.
Yeah.
Somebody way before us invented the wheel. We put new spokes, we change the tread, we do this, we do that. It's still a wheel. And until I don't think we're ever going to really invent the wheel. And we've got video now, and that's fine. You can shoot tons of footage and not waste out camera and film mag time. But you still have to tell a story. You still have to know how to tell a story.
Yeah.
And I think that somewhere along the line, the apprenticeship in this business, like being second, third assistant cameraman and being assistant sound, and you work your way up through the ranks a little bit. It doesn't have to take as long as I used to say it does. But I think you have to get a little bit of first-hand experience from people that know how to do it.
Yeah.
And then if you want to improve it, if you have a better way to do it, that's great. I'll listen. If you have a better way to do it, I'll listen. If an assistant comes in and shows me a scene that he's done that I had in my mind already how I was going to do it, and it comes out different, and wow, this is really different. Don't take credit for it. This is how you promote somebody.
Yeah.
As a director.
If you want to get ahead, you have to make that. You have to do the extra work.
You have to do the extra work. You have to be able to want to learn, and nobody can absorb this all in 4 years of college.
Yeah.
It's just the business now it's run by corporations, and it's about product. And as you can see, there's not many movies being made. And if there are, they have their big tentpole movies. They spend $200 million in it, and they have a library of Marvel comics you can go through forever. But you're not making Fabulous Baker Boys anymore.
Yeah.
I'm afraid you're never going to see a Godfather again. I'm really afraid that people are never going to see the richness of the 80s, 70s, 80s, 90s, the richness of stories and films that were made in those times, and you're not seeing them made now.
Even in the independent world, there's less of that than there even was
well,
5-10 years
I
ago.
understand the money's dried up and everything, and it gets very prohibitive to shoot movies now. But it's a shame that it's gone away a little bit. You know, I mean, my son is my assistant now, and I'm doing the same thing that my dad did, and he's learning. He spends time. I've got an Avid set up in a room in here, and it's open game for anybody that wants to use it and learn, and that's what my life's about now. That grandkids, and I still enjoy what I do. You know, I'm not working as much. I'm also trying different things. I'm not bored, but I like to direct. I think right now directing would be a great thing to do because I know I could do it efficiently. Because basically, any really good director that has an editing background is gonna give you a pretty efficient film.
Yeah.
You know, if they have a good story, they're going to give it to you efficiently shot. They know covers they need. They know covers they don't need. You know, a lot of the incredible Hal Ashby. You know, Hal Ashby.
He won an Oscar editing Heat of the Night.
Yeah.
Works for William Wyler and
well, absolutely. You find a lot of these guys are, you know, have that type of background, and you either want to do it, or you don't want to do it. I've toyed with the idea once in a while. You know, I get a chance to do some little things. And now it's not that I can do it better than anybody. That's not really a question. It's more a new challenge. You know, I think my only biggest problem would be not being able to edit it myself. I think that you know, there's one thing about when you shoot a movie and you direct it, and then you have to go in and edit it. The only person you can kick your ass is yourself. You know, why did I do this or why did I do that? I think that might be the only kind of sketchy part about it.
Yeah, you see someone like Steven Soderbergh, and he directs like 12 episodes of The Nick, and then he edits like all of them.
Yeah.
It's such an incredible. I don't know how he does that.
It's amazing, you know. But you know what though? Sometimes this show I just finished last year was a boxing movie, and I was on set. It was the director that really was open to suggestions and really a lot of help. So I was on set the whole time. Never really been completely on the set. Didn't cut anything.
Yeah.
Got to work with the actors. Got to make sure that the coverage and stuff we were getting was great. So then when I got back to the editing room, I found it was a much simpler process. I already knew what I had. It wasn't like new and fresh coming in. I already knew what we shot. And I'm going, we should have got that, but we didn't. So at least that process of being there, seeing what's shot gives you a bigger leg up in the editing process. You're not trying to guess what somebody else is trying to do.
Have you done that often, where you've been on the set of a film during shooting?
I've done it a little, but usually in times where all the films are, you know, lots of footage, and you just get so buried, and you still have time schedules and everything. I mean, you know, Out of Africa was over 1 million plus film. Son of a Woman was well over 1 million plus film, printed film. And the last show I did on film was A Time to Kill. And that, to me, was one of my best editing jobs I'd done, was on that film.
What was Joel Schumacher like to collaborate with?
Joel was amazing. He just let me go. He just said, you know, I want you to do this. It was probably one of the hardest scenes I've ever had to cut in my whole career, was the rape of a little black girl at the beginning of the show. I for the life of me, kept putting it off, and the first time I kind of showed him some, and he goes, "This is not. You've got to go deeper." I'm going, "Oh God, I can't. I can imagine what it's like to be in a plane crash. I can kind of guess and kind of get in that world. I can get in the world of anything really, but raping a 9-year-old little girl, is a world I couldn't get my mind into, and found myself just resisting. And then finally, I said, okay, and I had to let it go, and I was by myself. I had a big crew, and it was like midnight one night, and I had everybody in. And I think there was 2 girls and a couple guys, but I sat on the couch, and I said, here, let's look at this. And I turned the lights on, and I looked behind me, and I had two people had tears in their eyes. It was like shocking. So I remember showing Joel, and well, maybe we got a little too far, you know, but if that scene wasn't horrendous, you would have never justified Sam Jackson shooting those two kids.
Yeah.
And then the whole show would have completely
It's the
fallen
inciting incident of the whole story.
It had to be so horrendous that you could justify the shooting of those two guys.
Yeah.
And that was a challenge. That was really probably one of the hardest scenes I've ever had to cut.
And that film had some great, standout performances, some breakthrough performances. Matthew McConaughey, Samuel Jackson.
Yeah, Matthew was just new. They took a chance on him at that time, and Joel supported and took a chance on him. And Matthew we got to be very good friends. I mean, we worked on the weekends and just trying to keep involved where he was, what he was, inside of the movie. And it was helpful to him, and it was fun for me.
Yeah. Some directors' names I just want to kind of throw out there. One is Steve Kloves, who we talked about with the Fabulous Baker Boys. That's one of my favorite films. So he started as a screenwriter. I believe that was sort of the first film that he had directed.
It was his first film. Actually, late Mark Rosenberg was one of the producers, and he and Sydney Pollack were producing partners at that time. And Steve was the first-time director, and they were trying to find a match. And there was a lot of people that were being suggested to them, and Sydney for the first time said, "I think this would be a good fit." Young guy, first time, really my first kind of juicy thing that I was going to be on my own. And Steve and I met, and we hit it off immediately. It was just amazing pairing, really, between the two of us. And we forged ahead, and it became a kind of a family with Jeff and Bo Bridges and Michelle, who was coming up at that time.
Yeah.
And it was an experience that I'll never forget. It really was. I mean, it was capped off by a nomination, but
it was such great casting to have Jeff and Bo, playing real brothers as they are brothers, and the dynamic they had and the conflict. It was so real, and there was kind of a grit to it.
Really, and it almost didn't happen at the time. I think the studio didn't want to have Bo, which we never could figure out. And then, there was a time where Michelle got hot, and she was carrying the show, and it was kind of like, want to lessen Bo's part and bring up Michelle's part. And Steve, stood his ground. I mean, it was just, he learned a lot. I learned a lot in that film.
Yeah.
And stood behind what he wanted to do. And I think it came out. It was just an incredible experience.
Yeah. And then another, Martin Brest, did Son of a Woman. And Al Pacino went on to win an Academy Award. Really interesting film, a great dynamic between Chris O'Donnell and Al Pacino and their chemistry. So how would you sort of say Martin Brest was as a collaborator, and what was his process like?
Marty Marty had a little tough time making his mind up. We had shot so much.
Yeah.
There was just so much shot. And finding the dynamics between Chris's character and Al's character was paramount at the time, because a little too much was too much and too little was not enough. And so we experimented. We were also a little bit behind the gun at that time too. And there was two. Mike Tronick came on, and then Harvey Rosenstock came on. But there was, there's a Thanksgiving dinner scene that I did that it took me a week to cut, and there was probably, I don't know how many, there was 20,000 feet of film on it.
Wow.
And trying to go into each scene like that and try to make adjustments and find different things, we're going to run out of time. So I think it came out incredibly well. And that was another show that, was 2 hours and 50 minutes. And we had, at the studio's request, had to cut it down one time to preview. Marty didn't like it. And, I didn't really blame him at the time, but we were asked to do it. And then the edict was, if it scored the same preview-wise at 2 hours and 5-10 minutes as it did at 2 hours and 50 minutes, there wouldn't be any changes.
So you guys had sort of competing test screenings.
We had to go and try to do it. It wasn't done hastily. Some of it was, we'd fought a little bit on trying to make it too good. But I still had the confidence, and I remember telling Marty, I go, this is going to play no matter what.
Yeah.
I said, this is one of those shows that just keeps rolling, and Al is just so mesmerizing that I don't think you're gonna lose track of how much time you have. So inevitably, what happened was they agreed to do 2, and they both scored the same. I mean, it was really no difference at all. So we went with the longer version.
Yeah.
But that was rare. That's the first time I've ever seen a show that could be cut down that much play exactly the same as it did in the long version.
And not have any effect on the audience.
Have no effect on the audience, and had really no effect on the story. You know, it just was one of those things that it was a book that you could just keep turning the pages. It didn't matter how many pages there were, just kept hoping there were more.
I always wondered why Martin Brest never kind of went on to make a lot more films. He's obviously very talented, and the work shows. But
I'm not sure. I know that they followed up and they did Meet Joe Black, which I didn't do. I'm not sure, really, what happened. I think that the success of that movie was very tough to top, and material is always difficult. That's why Sydney never made that many movies. He was constantly looking for something to make. He was constantly sitting there going, "There's nothing out there I want to do."
Yeah, and he was a great developer of material. He would work many years, like even out of Africa, I believe that took a long time to get right.
It did, and almost everything he did, very rarely would do 2 pictures in 2 years. That was the difficult part about working with Sydney, because he didn't always work. And then I get sanctioned off into basically seemingly being Sydney's editor, and was hard to get to know and work with other directors.
Yeah, because that's sort of the career of an editor. Sometimes you try to work with a particular director, but then you sort of have to find.
You have to find it. Yeah,
way.
you have to find. Everybody has to eat, and it's difficult sometimes. I find it very difficult right now because basically all the directors that I've worked with have died, and I don't have any relationships with newer directors or anything else, and it makes it difficult. And I don't regret it. I do regret not seeing and getting to work with more people, because the people that I did get to work with, I really enjoyed. It was, I don't think I really had a bad experience with anybody I worked with. Even people that were supposed to be difficult. The more difficult they were, the better I got along with them.
Yeah, people sort of develop that reputation, but it's not always.
I think what happens
sometimes it's kind of a media spin, or.
Well, I think that it's a spin from people that are afraid of, I think if you know what you're doing and you're confident about what you're doing, I think is a major asset to somebody that is very difficult to get along with, because they just, as some people say, well, if I want your opinion, I'll give it to you. And I've just never been that way. We always joke, Sydney's a joke and say that. And I go, really? And he knew that I was a rebel. He was called the young punk, I wasn't at all unused to criticizing stuff. I go, well, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. And it was like, well, you think you can do better? Yeah. But it was always one of those things. My dad used to kind of cringe every so often, going, "Oh, you shouldn't. Maybe you can word it differently." It'd be in a screening, it was supposed to be a very dramatic moment, and I'd be laughing. And you could just see everybody, like 15 people, just freezing around me. And I'm going, I don't know, that's what it made me do. And then afterwards it'd be, so what are everybody's opinions? And I go, and he goes, I know yours. And he'd move on, this is Sydney. And then I'd come back, it makes me laugh. It was in an Out of Africa scene. I said, it made me laugh. And he and another editor had worked on it quite a bit. Yeah. And I just said, well, I don't know. I said, that was my first reaction, so I don't think that's what you want. He goes, no. And so I just took it and redid it, and it came out good. Out of Africa was a tough movie. We ran into obstacles all over the place, story-wise and length and logic, and it just, we had a time where we had to come in and Kurt Ludke and David Rayfield, incredible writers. We had this powwow on the weekend trying to figure out where the problems were and what was not working.
Because it was more of a character piece than it really was a plot.
Absolutely.
Straightforward narrative.
Absolutely. And it was, you have Robert Redford and Meryl Streep. Meryl Streep's probably one of the finest actors I've ever worked with in my life. It's just, she's amazing. She can do anything. And it was always been, and I've never had a chance to work on another show with her. It was pleasurable to cut because there was nothing really ever bad in anything she did. It was just different.
Yeah.
And I know Sydney loved her. And you know, all incredibly good actors gravitated towards him. And it was, you know, even working on The Firm and with Tom Cruise. And Tom was always listening. He was another sponge. You know, he's still this iconic star, but he really wanted him to be better, a better actor. He wanted to understand it better, and I always appreciated and liked him for that.
Yeah, no, it's great when people of all departments sort of come in and try to figure out what other people are doing, as opposed to sort of sticking to their own, you know, not wardrobe people over here, sound people over there. You know, it's good for everybody to merge together.
It's the only way I think it's the only way you can ever come out with a really good film, unless you're very lucky. You know, I mean, we're the last bastion of hope because, you know, production, they shoot, and everybody goes crazy, work long hours, and they shut the cameras off, and they go someplace else. And we're left holding this big egg, you know, and what you do with it is, you know, the time that you have and what they've actually shot. And you develop whatever the problems are, you fix, and whatever the things that are great, you enhance.
Yeah.
And then it's like, to me, it's always like, it's always like having a baby. You know, you take 9 months to nurture this pregnancy, and then you deliver the baby, and they come out, and you smack them on the butt, and people either go, ooh, that's kind of ugly, or, wow, what a beautiful baby. And that's kind of like a film. It used to always take us like 9 months, 10 months, and then you go out and you have your... Sydney we never did preview. Only movie we ever previewed was Interpreter. He didn't believe in the process. And then did at the last one. Very nerve-wracking for him to have people come and criticize his work before he's finished.
These are like the Nielsen tests.
Yeah, it was like a NRG thing, whatever those people are.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've always equated it to that, and it is hurtful. You know, you work and if you love your job, and you put your heart and soul into something, which we do, hours and hours and hours. I don't necessarily sit in a dark room. I hate that adage because I don't. I like light. But you work and you live and you die. You know, there's 3 stages of a movie. You finish shooting, you get into a cut, you start to make changes and you hate it. Then you make another set of changes and you kind of start loving it, and then you hate it, and then all of a sudden you love it, or most of the time you always love it at the end.
Yeah.
And whether people like it or not is always one of those, it's very subjective, you know. I mean, critics can be very cruel.
Yeah, a lot of critics really don't understand the mechanics of the process. They're sort of just judging it kind of at face value.
They used to criticize the film and the content, and I've noticed lately they criticize people. I've just never understood. You know, you're not even criticizing the movie. You're criticizing the person that you might not like. You know, you're criticizing something that they've done before, or here it is again, but it's never like really. There's only very few that I've read that, you know, really deal with the story. If you have legitimate criticism or likes or dislikes, that's fine.
Yeah,
that's part of this business. You know, that's what we're here for. We're here to entertain, and you know, if we do, we're successful. If we don't, we don't. You know, I mean, out of the almost 40 years I've been in this business, I've been really successful at the movies I've worked on. You know, we've had some bad ones, we've had some heartbreaks, you know, and you carry it with you for a little bit, and then you go move on, and you learn from your mistakes, and you know, you're going to make mistakes. You know, as an editor, as a director, as an actor, you're going to choose the wrong project, you're going to do this, but you always give your 100%, 110% what you're doing. And at the end it comes out bad. You feel bad, you feel hurt, you get angry at critics. You know, I mean, a few times I've always gone, who the hell is this person, you know? And what do you mean you're attacking my editing that looks choppy? What are you talking about? You know what? I mean, it's like one of those things going, don't you tell me what I'm doing. And then you have to realize that that's everybody's prerogative to do. You know, you got to be bigger than that to accept the criticism, and you've got to accept the praise.
Yeah, sort of accepting praise and criticism and not putting too much weight on either.
Absolutely. And at the end of the time, you have to go, I like this baby. It's the best we can do. Yeah. And, as Sydney used to say at the end of every movie, he goes, listen, your grandchildren, your children, your grandchildren, they're all going to see this movie. You're happy with it. Any last things, And it was always one of those moments of going, well, you go, well, I wish we could have done this. And then it was like, it was very funny. And then you go, a couple of years later, you go, God, we could have done this. Or look how kind of old-fashioned that was. Or it wasn't now. But, it's like clothes. Styles change, and they always come back. There's just very few things that continue to go on. I've never seen a group of a generation of directors and people that want to be somebody else. I have never in my life wanted to be somebody else. I've always wanted to be who I was. And if I was accused of stealing something from somebody, it was very inadvertent, or it was something I liked. You're always good. The best things in the world are something you've seen, good, but if you come up with them and they just happen to look like somebody else.
Yeah.
There was a scene in Baker Boys where we were doing the rehearsals, and it was compared to something that
all that jazz, yeah,
and that I stole this style. And I'm going,
yeah.
I didn't. I don't even. I did. It worked. I didn't even know what I was doing. I'm going, how the hell are we going to do this? Just shoot all these people sitting there singing, and doing this and this, and there's a bunch of them, and it's kind of boring. So, what do you do with it? And I finally just started playing. Well, if you take the music, and then you just insert different people and different reactions, and make the times feel long, then you've got something. So I went,
was that during the auditions
yes.
for Michelle Pfeiffer? Yeah.
Yeah. At one time, that audition thing was hilarious. It was very long, but it as a set piece, it was the funniest thing I've ever seen. And then Sydney came in one time and looked at our cut, and Steve and I were both, very confident about it. And at the end, it's great. He goes, listen, that interview stuff, it's way too long. Really? It's great. Are you kidding? It's great. No, it's really too long. And one of the things that he used to always remind me, which was one of my faults, was my rhythms could be very, very the same. I had to learn, and still to this day learn how to change rhythms inside of my rhythms. It's like 2 years ago my wife decided to have me take salsa lessons. And I did it for a year. And one of the things that this woman told me, she says, it's amazing how you can pound a beat out. You know exactly when you're out of rhythm and when you're in rhythm and when you're in beat and when you're not beat. I go, that's just inherent. Something you can't teach. You just can't teach that. When in lectures and things that I've done, they go, what is it? What is that? I said, some of it you can't teach. Some of it's inside you.
Yeah, just instinctual. And
it's just instinctual. And sometimes, I can't remember names, but I can remember visually things that I've seen once, and remember that in 10,000 feet ago or so that there was this shot and we can use it over here.
Yeah.
And not being always just sanctioned to what has been shot for this scene. You always have to open up your mind to what it is.
Sometimes you cut scenes and you see the scene just playing by itself, but then you're seeing it within the context of the whole film. Is it sometimes sort of the whole is greater than the parts, in a sense?
I find myself adjusting.
Yeah.
I pride myself in keeping an overview of what I'm trying to do. It's one of the things that's very easy to slip into is saying, this scene works wonderful. This is perfect. And then you put it together with everything else and it's not working quite as good as you thought. And it's always like the plugging the dike theory, You try to have a great beginning and you try to have a great ending, and hopefully the middle kind of catches up, or they know that they'll forgive a slow beginning as long as you can pick up and make a great ending. Well, now none of them are acceptable. You have to just be instantly engaged because of just the way media is today. A perfect example to me was Slumdog Millionaire. I started it and I was like doing something. Oops, I have to go start it again because they made me pay attention right from the beginning. And so now I went, okay, well, I've learned something from that. That was a brilliant movie from top to bottom. The craft, everybody knew their craft, and why it was not picked up right away is beyond me. There was a lot of very sorry people in this business.
I think it was going to go straight to like DVD or not even go to theaters.
Nobody wanted it. Nobody wanted it. I happened to be in Toronto during the TIFF, and I was working on I think I was doing Casino Jack. I think it was. And somebody said, "Oh, I just saw this movie, Slumdog Millionaire." I went, "Slumdog what?" Slumdog. You have to go see it. And I didn't see it up there, but it was just like this rage. It was like wildfire broke out, and came back here, and people started seeing it, and it was just like one of those movies that you're going, "There's nobody in it. It's brilliantly shot. It's brilliantly acted." The only thing I didn't like about it, they didn't give me enough time to really absorb the story, and they start dancing at the end. That's my only criticism. If they give me another 4 minutes to really just go, "Oh, what a great story that was," instead of bopping into the Bollywood stuff, I was my only criticism. I was going, "No, not yet, not yet, please." I just let the story wash over me a minute. But other than that, I mean, visually it was stunning. The actors were stunning. It was just one of those things that all the stars aligned and clicked, and it was good. I love to see a lot more of those type of movies around.
Yeah, it had a great energy, a great pace.
It was a pace, the energy, the visuals. There was no question in my mind when it came to time for voting the Academy of what it was. Just great in all categories. It was really, there's not one that not very often can you find a movie that you go, "Wow, this is just perfect from here to here." And every category, every craft, every choice that was made was just, couldn't second guess it. Yeah. And my hat was off to them. I thought it was just brilliant. I thought that was the first time the Academy actually got something right, and just rewarded these people for making this movie. And it's an individual, selfish thing, the Academy stuff. And I've been nominated and whatever, but.
And your father won an Oscar.
Yeah, I've got it sitting right there.
Oh wow!
It's never been my goal to win an Oscar. I find it. I think probably I'm really not reclusive, but I'm not really the most outgoing, industry person. I mean, my private life is my private life, and some people think I'm aloof. It's not about that. It's just I have to have separation from work and family. It just, if I don't, it just becomes just overwhelming.
Yeah.
And I mean, I had a family. I'm starting to have a family at 28, 29 years old, and they suffered a little bit because I was right in the middle of my career. I now know the mistakes I made family-wise, but career choices were all I had in mind at that time.
Yeah. Is that tough for a lot of young editors that you see? They're trying to kind of balance.
Well, I think right now it's very difficult because there's just not many movies being made. I think that the tendency right now is all the younger editors are getting crushed down a little bit because everybody that has experience is coming down because it's just not making that many pictures. And a lot of it's television. It's a lot. I mean, I did the first time in my life, I did a pilot 3 or 4 months ago. And the orders that it was Taylor Hafer was directing it. And all said, "Will you do this?" And I go, "Yeah, I've never done a pilot before." And he kept saying, "Well, your experience." I go, "I don't know."
You did a couple of features with Taylor Hafer.
Yeah, I did.
Right? Against All Odds.
And White Nights.
Yeah.
And we hadn't worked together in a long time. And so the reunion was going to be fun. I thought it would be great. I don't know how editors do that in any why you'd ever want to go back to doing pilots. It's the most insane schedule I've ever seen in my life. We were working 15, 16-hour days, 7 days a week.
You would think because it's only like a 50 or 45-minute piece, it wouldn't be.
It was unbelievable. I mean, I just said, I hated this. I mean, I really did. I said, if this is what it's come down to, I'm going to go sell shoes or something.
Is it because there are so many notes coming in from
Well, you have so many deadlines. Every day is a deadline, and all the pressure's on the editors because theoretically directors get 2 days, producers get 2 days or whatever it is, and then the network get 3 days or 2 days, and somebody else gets 2 days, and you're just constantly making changes and constantly chasing.
Are you editing while they're shooting as well?
Yeah, you're editing while you're, because you basically, the director comes in. I mean, Taylor had a little bit different situation, but they have 2 days, so if you're not showing them something good, they're in trouble.
So I was going to ask you about one last director that you worked with, George Hickenlooper, who tragically passed away after Casino Jack was released. he had primarily done a lot of documentaries. So was that a different process working with him?
He was, without a doubt, in early 50, I think is what he was, or late 40s. We hit it off immediately. He's another guy with a tough reputation, being hard to work with. This guy was. I'm so upset when he passed away. We were going to do another show. That I thought I finally found my next guy that I was going to hook up with for a while.
Yeah.
And he was talented, and he was hard on himself, but he was a shooter, and he knew script, and he knew how to make a movie. We made that movie in a very short period of time, and it was all him. And then we got along incredibly well. I really liked George a lot. I miss him. He was really my next guy. I thought this was guy we're gonna. He said even before, it was like right after Casino, he goes, "Well, we're gonna do all our movies together." And so that was it was shocking. He was a great guy, a really great guy, very talented.
Yeah, it was a great piece, Jack Abramoff and Kevin Spacey's performance in that. Really
it came out to be kind of a comedy, which nobody thought it was going to be.
Kind of a satirical look at politics.
Yeah, it was a fun film. It got for some reason, got squished, but we're not too sure exactly why. But it should have done a lot better than it did. Did great in DVD, but it got kind of shuffled around somehow in the distribution. I'm not sure totally, but. No, it was a fun film. It was great. Kevin was great. Everybody was good in it. It was a fun thing to put together, and it kind of evolved into something that nobody knew. So this was an ingredient film again. You have Kevin, and you have the story, and then you added John Lovitz in, and it added a whole different dynamic to the film. It became lighter. It became funnier. It also had its serious moments, but. The dynamic between Lovitz and Kevin were amazing. They sparked. It was just something.
It's a great casting choice. Picking a comedian or a comedic
actor.
And
when they did it, I go, really? And then I saw some of the stuff and go, oh wait a second, this is like really changing. And Kelly, with being, I was like, this is starting to work, but it also took a lighter tone. And realized it very early on. This is taking a lighter tone. I go, George, this is like. There's some fun stuff in here because they were selling it, and if you had read anything about it, it was, serious political satire, whatever, but it wasn't comedic, supposedly. There was supposed to be a little comedy in it, but not comedic. And it turned out to be we previewed it one time, it was like, wow, this is a great comedy. It was like, people really liked it. And then in the end, you're going, and, Abramoff at the time was George and Kevin had...
was he cooperative in the making
He was
of
still
the film?
in jail when they first started doing it, and they had gone in and saw each other really well. And Kevin and Jack had hit it off really well. They both did impersonations, and they had kind of his full support. But we also dabbled in something, that the politics at the time, though, some of those people were still, Tom DeLay and all those people were still, under indictment, and they were still out. And I think the film touched a little nerves in my opinion, in Washington, and then kind of like got suppressed a little bit. And then George died, and then kind of went with him.
Yeah. Sort of to wrap everything up, I was going to ask you sort of what is sort of a vital lesson that you would pass on to editors coming up, and you sort of touched on it a little before about sort of taking criticism and understanding.
Yeah,
that.
I think you have to learn your craft.
Yeah.
I think there's a certain amount of learning that you have to do it's too easy right now to get onto a video editing machine, whether it be Avid or whatever the other ones are now, to make images change back and forth and put something together that makes cohesive sense with dialogue is fine, action is fine, but what they're lacking in is the knowledge of seeing how actors work, and I think that learning performance, learning nuance, and learning behaviors is something that's lacking a little bit because of the speed of some of the editing that's been going on now. There's nothing ever time for it to breathe, and people are saying, well, it's choppy. Well, it's because nobody's taking time to find out what the scene. It doesn't have to be long. It doesn't have to be short. It just has to be the substance has to be there. There has to be a reason for what the scene's there for.
Yeah.
The bad scenes that make it out of movies a lot of times are ones that just you try forever to shoehorn them in because they're supposed to be there and they're scripted and they're supposed to be there and they have to come out. It's something that it's a learning experience. I think they can learn. Writers, you can learn well from writers because writers think the same way an editor does, or they should. Because basically all we're doing is rewriting their words.
Yeah.
And I think they have to understand actors and acting, and I think they have to have, a good sense of timing and rhythm, and I think it's a lot of practice. I think this is a craft that some of the people think they can walk in and do it without knowing what it takes to do it. I think it's become, it's just a tool. The Avid and all the video, it's a tool. You have to learning how to use this tool. I could teach you in 2 days. You could physically go on there and start editing. Not a problem. Laptops, and they came out with Final Cut, whatever it's called, Pro. And everybody became an editor. Everybody was, I'm editing my film now, I'm editing. And that's fine for home movies, but there's more to it that goes into this. There's much more thought process of how to make a good movie. It's how to tell a story. How do you tell a story? How do you do it in an interesting way? How do you make these actors grow? How do you have their arc and their characters? How do you show that? How do you build that? You have to learn how to build those performances. Somebody said, you're a performance editor. Well, that's fine. It's a nice moniker, but that's not really, that's the strong suit. It's a part of it. Learning performance, learning rhythms, learning what the show's about, keeping an overview of the story, what you're trying to do.
And not being boggled down the technical elements. And
the technical elements, people get very bogged down with matching, and you just be, matching, they're drinking with their right hand and their left hand, and they go into a quandary about, oh my God, this won't cut. And you go, you know what? Just cut it. Just cut it, because if the actor's carrying you through, you won't notice the bottle. I can't tell you how many times people have changed. Out of Africa, Redford's peeling an orange with Meryl Streep in the scene outside, and the orange is almost peeled, and it's not peeled, and it's semi-peeled, and it's green, and it's orange. Nobody ever sees it.
Yeah.
Because you're paying attention to what they're doing. But you get to the first time I looked at it, I'm going, oh God, what am I going to do with this? Look at that. The orange is peeled, or it's not peeled. Or the scene in Bobby Deerfield, I remember my dad struggling with, he and Marta Keller having sundaes, and the scene took so long that they ran out of strawberry topping on these vanilla sundaes, and they suddenly became chocolate sundaes, and it was, but nobody really sees it.
Yeah.
And if they're involved in the story and the people that are telling you the story, you don't see a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, and the actors and the story become the vocal point of the scene. And
that's what they should be. Yeah. We are invisible. The best editing in the world is ones you don't feel. Some of them are made to feel. Action stuff, you're made to feel the cut. Dialogue scenes, you shouldn't be feeling jerked around. You should be, to me, I start a scene, I put myself in that scene. I'm one of these characters, and I have to decide what I want to see. I want to see if somebody's reacting, somebody's talking, what they're doing.
Somebody's listening.
Somebody's doing that. I want to be, you're the one that's in control of the scene. And you have to, I go in front of the screens and I just immerse myself right into the scene. I can't find any other way to do it. And you kind of live and you suddenly become people. I mean, I can't tell you how long I walked around talking like Colonel Slade and Al Pacino.